And our Margaret Brennan joins us now from the White House. So, Margaret, legal experts seem to agree that those tweets from the president will complicate things for the administration as the revised travel ban makes its way through the courts. Sean Spicer is expected to take to the podium today at 2 p.m. How will he defend his own words when he said to you in the White House press corps that it's not a travel ban? And then yesterday, Sarah Huckabee Sanders says, doesn't matter what you call it.
Right. It's already a Saturday Night Live skit. In fact, it was part of one in the past, a ban or not a ban. This is one of the challenges, the chief ones, for the communications team here at the White House, which is that despite their best efforts to set a strategy, to set messaging, to set language that coincides with their not only legislative agenda, but the legal framework that the Justice Department is advising them on, the president likes to shoot from the hip and speak directly on Twitter. While he was rewarded for that on the campaign trail, as you heard in the piece and as you just said, it may actually hurt him in terms of getting his agenda through, and certainly in trying to persuade the Supreme Court to rule on the merits of the case and on the legal basis that the White House believes they have in putting this travel ban in place for 6 countries and also blocking some refugees on the basis of, or the premise that they pose a national security threat. When the president is using different language and when he has, as he did in the past, suggested that it was religious based as a Muslim ban, that changes this entirely. It reframes the conversation, and in fact, the president, when he's shooting from the hip, is shooting himself in the foot.
Interesting. On to this criticism of London's Mayor Sadiq Khan. What are your sources inside the State Department, the White House, saying about the impact that this back and forth could have, you know, when we're talking about the U.S. relationship with the UK? I know Prime Minister Theresa May felt the need to sort of wade in herself and defend the Mayor of London.
It's a dangerous distraction at a time when there are already awkward conversations and awkward relationships between the U.S. and its European allies. These are some of the closest partners that we've had in the great democracies of the world that the U.S. has aligned itself with. So alienating friends is never a good idea because it's their support that helps America maintain its economic and military dominance around the world. It obviously helps to have friends and not to make enemies there. But I would say that so much of the intelligence sharing, the framework of U.S.-UK relations won't be affected by this. Where it does hurt, of course, though, is the relationship between this White House and 10 Downing Street. It hurts when you are insulting each other, and certainly it could make the president's at least plan to visit London complicated when the Mayor of London says he's no longer welcome because he is verbally, he believes, being attacked at a time when he is simply trying to help his own citizens. The White House would say, look, the president is just speaking plainly, and perhaps the UK is not taking its threat serious enough. Of course, that causes great consternation to our partners in the UK who we share and work with on counterterrorism. And
Margaret, I mean, just to continue down this path that Anne-Marie was asking you about, I mean, look, I think for Americans to understand how unprecedented this is, it would be as if the mayor of London criticized Mayor Rudy Giuliani in the wake of 9/11. And that's what we're talking about here. So I wonder if the sources at the State Department, at the White House, are saying, look, this is troubling because it speaks to a larger issue. The president attacking another ally, the mayor of another ally city, in the wake of this horrific attack when he should be comforting our friend and neighbor.
I think Americans would be insulted. I think that's a speculative comment on my part, but I do think it'd be fair to say Americans would be insulted if their own leaders were attacked in the wake of a terrorist attack. But what I would say when you talk to diplomats, what you hear is this broader frustration that it's hard to repair these damages to alliances at a time when there aren't enough diplomats, or there aren't diplomats empowered and nominated and appointed to be able to handle the relationship. That is also a broader challenge for the administration, that if the president's going to say one thing and then you want the relationship to continue to progress despite those harsh words, you need to have professional diplomats to do that, and the White House hasn't appointed many of the people who should be filling these jobs, including the person at the State Department who's supposed to oversee relations with all of Europe right now. And certainly in the wake of disputes over NATO and disputes with the European Union, there is need for someone to be in that job, and they're waiting on the White House to appoint someone. They're waiting on Rex Tillerson at the State Department to argue to appoint someone.
Listen, before we let you go, Margaret, I want to ask you about something else that the president tweeted about. After a number of Arab nations announced that this week that they would be cutting diplomatic ties with Qatar, President Trump weighed in on Twitter this morning, writing, "During my recent trip to the Middle East, I stated that there can no longer be funding for radical ideology. Leaders pointed to Qatar. Look." What is the significance of this message from the president?
Well, it's the first time we've heard President Trump weigh in on this dramatic diplomatic dispute that erupted in the past sort of 24 to 48 hours, where you saw a number of major Arab powers, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain, Yemen, others, cut off diplomatic ties with Qatar, and in fact put in place a blockade, blocking air traffic, blocking entry to ports, really squeezing this tiny emirate tightly. And that is, we are hearing, in related to their support, or at least not their support, but their dealings with Iran, and also their past dealings with the Muslim Brotherhood. That is viewed as a direct threat to those countries. When the president is weighing in, however, it adds a new layer here, because it suggests somehow the president seemed to be taking credit for his role in causing this diplomatic dispute to erupt. And given the fact that there are thousands of American troops stationed in Qatar, which is a significant U.S. base for operations in the region throughout countries in the region, and that war against ISIS, this could be not only diplomatically awkward, but it could present some problems here. This is usually something that you would want to handle quietly through diplomatic channels. Rex Tillerson yesterday tried to do that, saying, look, I'd like to help moderate this. I'd help to try to get them to come to some agreement, sort out their differences. Today, the president really put an exclamation point, drew a lot of spotlight to this issue, and essentially said it was a result of his recent travel to the Middle East.
Margaret, it's interesting that this has happened right now. What are just sort of the longer-term implications for the people of Qatar? I mean, are they in any danger of, for example, there's a blockade, you say. How will they get food and supplies? What's going to happen down the road?
Well, you saw that initial scramble to go to the supermarket and to buy things. And look, this is a very, very rich, very, very small country, but it's at such a strategic point that it's incredibly important for the United States. Like I said, we have a significant number of U.S. troops there. But what you've seen already is Qatar essentially buckle, saying, well, we're ready to talk here about a few things. Kuwait has offered to help moderate that. And look, there have been long simmering disputes. There was a diplomatic standoff for 9 months. This was a year or so ago. But that was just at the level of withdrawing ambassadors. Now, as you said, I mean, you have ports being blockaded. This is real pressure being put on a tiny country, and this could certainly complicate things for Americans who are trying to do business there, particularly to have the President of the United States imply here that he's happy to see this kind of pain being put on the country. But perhaps strategically, the president's actions here will have the results he says he wants, which is to get Qatar's leader to cut some of their dealings off with Iran, and that's what we believe he means by that, mentioned in his tweet about radical ideology, and perhaps to back away from their support for the Muslim Brotherhood. We'll see.
All right, Margaret Brennan at the White House for us. Margaret, thank you as always.